So you have roots in California, and that is also the center of surveillance capitalism. Is there any relationship between the two?
I kind of grew up knowing all about this stuff, mainly because Silicon Valley was actually really close to me, and yeah, my parents were really interested in this as well, and so the only real connection I'd say is, I mean, I got Facebook at about 13 years old because it was such a big thing. Everybody was so excited about it. So, I was one of the people to get it at about 13 years old. So,
Wow.
yeah, that's
I'm well over 50 and I've never used it.
that that should be normal, but
Yeah. Right. Well, in your little story and your little investigation, you talked about a new age of modernity. So what was that previous age of modernity then, and how did that change?
well, the first age was mainly industrialization and mass production. So people found a way to get a large group of people what they want when they wanted it, at a very affordable price as well. And we saw that that was the first modernity because oil was the most valuable asset on Earth. But recently, in 2018, data actually surpassed the value of oil. So now data is the most valuable asset on Earth, and kind of making it now the tech era, I guess, which is the new second modernity.
Yeah.
And it's also new modernity. You're able to connect. Well, the industrialization got people what they needed, what they wanted at a time, whenever they wanted at an affordable price. The tech industry is able to connect thousands of people all over the world, uh, depending on anything they want, really. So.
Yeah. And with the tech era, we created a whole new business model in which you seemingly receive all kinds of new services, internet services for free. But is it really for free?
Well, nothing is for free, and it can't be for free, especially because these companies are now, they are the richest companies that we have now. First, they get money through advertising revenue, but what they're actually trading, what is the more valuable part, is cookies, which are the large packets of data. All of the actions that we take online, on the internet, on these platforms, they're all recorded and stacked into these packages called cookies, and they're sold from company to company because companies are trying to develop algorithms and things that will eventually determine our personality based on the data that we're given and predict our behavior. So it's not, it's for free financially. We don't have to pay for it, but all of these we're giving them gigantic amounts of data points, which are, it's just information about us, and they're selling it from everywhere. So that's what we're paying for it. I mean, Shoshana Zuboff even said that we are now the commodity.
Do you think actually that those companies can know ourselves better than we know ourselves?
Yes, I think they definitely know us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
They're machines, right? They're able to take these data points and organize it in a way that we unconsciously do, but they're doing it consciously. They see all the actions we take, and these models that they develop to predict our behavior get better and better the more they're used. And now they're incredible because they suggest things that we click on and that we like and are interested in. So, yeah, I definitely think they know us better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, unfortunately, it makes a lot of sense. Who do they target in general, would you say?
Well,
Surveillance capitalism.
they do target everybody. I mean, everyone who uses the platforms, that everyone who uses them, but they focus mainly on a certain type of people. Cambridge Analytica, which was a data company, they named them the Persuadables. And the Persuadables were groups of people who they were not for one side or the other. They didn't have a set position or a set mindset on something. They could be swung. And so a lot of companies target these people so that they can swing them to their side, because then they grow their consumer base rather than just making their current consumers more loyal. They want to gain more. So these persuadables are they're very valuable because they can just be swung left or right. It doesn't matter, depending on what they see, basically.
This is called surveillance capitalism, and people make money, but making money is not really a problem in general. So what is the really big deal? What is the problem, for example, on a societal level?
Buckminster Fuller said that whether it'll be utopia or oblivion, it'll be a touch and go relay race until the end, which I thought was a really good quote because it's true. There are both positive and negative parts, but I believe the problem that's coming out now, that we've seen more recently, is it influences people's mindsets and makes them believe something so strongly that they are deaf to other people's opinions or views. And that can be really serious when it comes to politics or when it comes to for the right to vote, basically, because it can, we've seen before, that it's influenced politics, and it influences culture such as generations. A generation that's really been influenced with it is, of course, Gen Z, the internet generation. It's kind of a big question because there's lots of problems that are kind of added up to it.
You made an infographic, kind of a big circle that starts with, what was it? The use of social media and all kinds of free internet platforms. And it ends with a potential for civil war. Mm-hmm. So can you go into that dynamic a bit?
Yeah. So it seems like a big jump from the use of social media to civil war, just looking at it, but kind of starts the collection of big data, of course, collecting bigger and bigger amounts of data points and cookies, the big packets. These big data packets are used to then predict the behavior and determine personality. Then based off of these predictions, suggestions are created for new content and things that might interest us. And once the suggestions are taken, the publisher makes money. And because this is what gets them money, they want to find a way to keep people keep people using the products like this, interacting with the posts and with the photos. So they developed addictive qualities. The refresh button and the like button they both produce the same adrenaline rush as slot machines in Las Vegas. So they keep people using the way that they want them to use the product, basically. So these suggestions they're shared between millions of people, and they continue to suggest these contents based on the predictions. But then they will only show content that the predictions have predicted for that behavior. They won't show anything outside of that. So people are not presented with any other opinions or positions that are supporting opposing views. They're only seeing what reaffirms their beliefs. Then if this goes further, there's a lack of understanding to the other side. They won't understand how you could not see facts. And something we hear all the time is the other side doesn't listen to facts, or they don't listen to reason. And this will fuel the anger and frustration that they have for the other side that can't seem to listen to reason. And this will eventually spill out into society. So it'll be taken from the online world to the real world. And a specific example I had later with Cambridge Analytica and the Brexit campaign and the Donald Trump campaign, this situation happened in a country that has a serious emphasis on freedom of speech. And you're in the States, they praise it. You can protest or share whatever you want, say whatever you want. And this meant that there was a heavy spread of fake news or misinformation, and people started to rely on this fake news and misinformation and used it to determine which candidate they would want in the future. This is for a specific example, but it could be generalized as well. But then more big lies plague the internet. We don't know what's true. And later, again, people are not shown anything that they don't believe in, and they start to believe in it very strongly. So it creates a complete polarization. So each side only sees what reaffirms their own beliefs, and they're not seeing anything that supports the other side. And it's almost as if they're living in two different worlds because they're so ingrained in their circles that they can't get out of it. It's hard to get out of because these models are working 24/7. And then you get extremism in this way. And extremism sounds like a big word, but to be honest, I think it's a bit normalized in our society due to this anyway. So then you get a deafness to all opinions but your own. And the thing is, these opinions that people fight so strongly for may not have even been their own opinions in the first place or their own viewpoints in the first place. It may have been a suggestion from a random algorithm that predicted something that they liked. And so because there's deafness, there's no compromise because no one is listening. And what do you get when there's no compromise in a society? You get civil war. So it seems like a big jump, but it actually, I think it's not too far off from reality. I actually really don't think it's too far off. I think it may happen. So.
Oh, well, you see, especially in the United States, you see, of course, a lot of polarization between the Democrats and the Republicans, and very high emotions, probably more on the Democratic side, but definitely also on the Republican side.
Yeah, it's definitely both sides.
Yeah. There is something special now. It is new. It is something that we never encountered as a society, but also never really encountered as a generation. You have to come to terms with it and to live with the consequences of it. How does it impact, for example, Gen Y, who grew up with, no, not really grew up with it, but adopted it later in youth, and Gen Z, what you are, who, well, like you said, adopted it when you were 13, or in many cases even younger.
These two generations are definitely the most impacted by this whole modernity. With millennials, they were impacted by it in almost a positive way because they were the creators of it. Although they were introduced to social media when they maybe middle school, high school, they weren't introduced to smartphones. That's the main difference because they had connections to social media, but it wasn't 24/7. They were able to maintain a separation between the real world and the online world, and they were able to maintain their connection to the online world and the internet world and have a balance. But Gen Z, while millennials were creating new social media apps and platforms that Gen Z really wanted, we also got smartphones. And when smartphones were given to Gen Z I saw an average age of 11 to 13 years old, which is when I got mine as well, actually. And what came with smartphones, it was social media. So Gen Z grew up constantly on these social media apps and on these smartphones. And the thing, because we grew up with this, we started normalizing things that are not normal in the world. Like we grew up thinking that it was normal for us to compare ourselves to thousands of people, for thousands of people to have comments or opinions about us, for thousands of people to know what we're doing on a daily basis or what we're doing in our lives, where we are, who we're friends with. And it's normal for companies to know everything about us because we spend so much of our time online and because all of that's recorded. Companies know everything about us, but Gen Z doesn't really care about this. They know this, but they don't care. My sister asked me this, and I even told her, they don't. I mean, why would I care? This was before I learned all about this, of course. But that's because we're doing all these things. It's normal for humans to compare each other to one another. That is normal, but we're not supposed to do it on such a scale. I mean, we can contact thousands of people. That's an incredible amount of people that is not supposed to be normal, and it can be incredibly unrealistic and overwhelming. And because it's overwhelming, and because it's unprecedented, we don't know what we're dealing with. We don't know what the problem is, and sometimes we don't know that it can be overwhelming. And I think that's why Generation Z has been seen to be the most depressed, anxious, stressed, loneliest generation in our time, because of all. I believe it's because of all these things. It's yeah.
And now you have to enter the post-COVID world. That is going to be different. That is probably going to be economically much less than it was when you grew up.
Exactly.
And you're not super prepared for any life at all, in some sense, and not any real life at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've been so ingrained and used to this that we have such a different life from the generations before us because we may not be ready for it when we should be to go out and do life, basically. We may not be not as equipped as other generations in the past.
Yeah. And that all sounds pretty negative. But Buckminster Fuller, he also suggested that it might have positive sides. So if you have to make a case for the positive sides, what would you say?
Well, it's a bit hard for me to make it a positive case for it, but I do know that, I mean, surveillance capitalism could have so many benefits. It could resolve, I mean, it could go so we could have a completely just system. If everybody is these companies know what everybody is doing at any time, we would know who was right and who was wrong. We would know who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. And there wouldn't have to be a need for he said, she said, or trials. We would know. It's also incredibly convenient. I mean, we don't have to type our passwords into our phones when we unlock them anymore. It's, face recognition or fingerprint recognition, or we don't have to remember phone numbers anymore. Convenience is a really big part. So our lives would be much easier. Our lives are much easier because of it. The ability to connect to thousands of people that's incredible. I know I made it sound like a negative thing before because it's incredibly overwhelming, but that's also incredible, and it's an incredible advancement for things such as globalization. It is good for the long run if it's used correctly, if it's used for the betterment of society and for the betterment of people in society. It can also be a deterrent towards discourage against criminal behavior or reduce it. And we also have things that, personalized services, personalized experiences, personalized settings. So we don't have to look for things that we're interested in anymore. It's there. We don't have to do anything. So if all of these things are used for the betterment, that's the key, because all of these things I just listed, you could take them either positively or negatively. If they're used as for the betterment, it could create a utopia. But if it's used for the what's the word? Exploitation. Yeah, of society, then it'll be in oblivion. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I think you made
exploitation. Yeah, of society, then it'll be in oblivion. So
yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I think you made a real case for the oblivion side, and I'm not really sure if you really made a case for the utopia side. And the problem with a utopia is that it always turns into a dystopia. And so if you give other people control over your behavior, then it is so difficult to prevent that will actually not be used against you and only to your advantage.
Right. Which I makes me kind of believe that an oblivion is way more likely.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Very clear story.